it doesn't have to be help Ukraine in an unrighteous way versus forget about Ukraine. Why don't we help Ukraine in a righteous way, in such a way that actually does serve America?
Now, you see him on television, and it's true you might form a different impression. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock. Zelensky is too decent for terrorism. Now, you see him on television, and it's true you might form a different impression. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock. But don't believe your own eyes. Actually, Mr. Zelensky is a very good man. The best, really. As George W. Bush once noted, he is our generation's Winston Churchill. Of all the people in the world, our shifty, dead-eyed Ukrainian friend in the tracksuit is uniquely incapable of blowing up a dam. He's literally a living saint, a man in whom there is no sin. That's why Lindsey Graham is so attracted to him. They're just two good people, hanging out together and being good. And like all good people, when they meet in person, they spend a lot of time talking about killing people and laughing like friends do. Here's the pair last week.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
The things you do for your country.
Thank you very much for your coming. Thank you
you.
very much. Thanks, United States, people of the United States for all big support. President Biden, bipartisan
Yes.
support, Congress, and really we thank you so much.
Bipartisan support.
Yes, it's very important. So we appreciate for. We know that from first days we have total support. It's about 38 billion, and the big support, very
The
important.
best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
No, it's, we're on this is 457th day of a war that was supposed to last 3 days.
Yeah.
You amaze me. Your country amazes me.
It's about our people and about your people. Your people help our people. All our appreciations.
You remind me of our better selves in America. That there was a time in America that we were this way, fighting to the last person. We're going to be free or die.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free,
Yes.
and we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
Yes, but they came to our territory.
Yeah.
We are not fighting on their territory.
Tucker Carlson really likes to insult Zelensky personally. I'm not sure why he has a personal vendetta against him. I think he's pushing back against this distrust of mainstream media and the establishment and this whole push to go to war. But still, do you really have to insult the person like that? He calls him sweaty and rat-like. And this could actually be taken, depending on how you look at it, as an anti-Semitic term, because there's people who have characterized Jews as rats in the past. Then he calls him a comedian turned oligarch. So right here, when he says this, I'm like, Tucker, what are you doing? Are you just coming out like with your sassy, snappy monologue and don't even care if what you're spewing out of your mouth is accurate? He talks about the iron law of the universe being that the truth always wins. Well, then why don't you try it? Like, what are you talking about? He's not an oligarch now. At most, according to accusations, he has 15 million in assets in offshore accounts. His friends have some, according to the Pandora Papers. And then he's got, maybe according to Seymour Hersh, who calls Belarus Belarus. So I'm not sure how credible he is. But he said he embezzled $500 million, but he can provide absolutely zero proof. I mean, it's not hard if you think, oh, Ukraine's corrupt. They're known for embezzlement. They're known for offshore money laundering. Blah, 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 blah. We're sending all this money. I know. I'll write a story about Zelensky embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying we have absolutely zero proof. He cannot provide any evidence. And even if you had $500 million, I don't know if that's technically oligarch money. It might be kind of right on the line. I think you got to have at least $1 billion. I'm not sure exactly, but anyhow, I don't understand this kind of just personal attack. And then he calls him a persecutor of Christians, which we're going to look at later in this movie. It's not a movie. It's not a documentary. It's just a video. Is he a persecutor of Christians? We're going to talk about this in some depth. And then he calls him a friend of BlackRock. So finally, he gets something right because, well, you could say he's a friend of Klaus Schwab and a friend of BlackRock and a friend of a lot of other shady characters, extreme leftist, globalists. He spoke in 2020 at the World Economic Forum, and this is my greatest concern about him. Now, today, I'm going to try to look at a fair assessment of both his pros and cons. I'm not going to judge him as a pastor. I've seen people post videos of him, in this video where he was dancing kind of like a homo or something. He did Dancing with the Stars in hot pink. I don't, whatever you want to make out of that. The Ukrainian version, which he actually won. He did some skit where he played the piano with his penis, so I guess he's a pervert. He had a skit with Noah where he was playing Noah talking to God. You might say it's sacrilegious in a sense. I only watched some of it before. It was just, I thought the costumes were good and he was doing a good job acting, but the writing of it was a little bit boring. Anyhow, I'm not going to judge him as I would a pastor or as some kind of religious leader. He's not that at all. When he gave a speech around Christmas time about praying, he just has bad theology. He doesn't understand prayer, but at least he's trying to speak to the Christian community of Ukraine. So I'm going to judge him as a secular leader, one who's compromised. And what I want to do is ask the question, is he in the back room with the guy petting the bald cat, kind of moving pieces around on this global chessboard? Or is he basically just being told, this is what we're doing? And as a desperate person in Ukraine who needs help from world powers, he's kind of just going along with it. So I would like to consider two things, and I have a couple thoughts of why it could potentially be either way. I'm not exactly sure. Some of the things that he spoke about at the World Economic Forum in 2020 was sustainability, which is a real big kind of buzzword about population control. So I don't know if he understands that or not. He talked about climate change and even mentioned Greta, and it's like, come on, man. Are you, like, basically this is just like, oh, you're just eating it up, whatever they told you. Are you seriously a scientist? Do you seriously have scientists in Ukraine who did serious research and serious thinking about this climate change stuff? It's a red flag of leftism, not to mention the fact that they've been trying more than once, 3 or 4 times now, since he's been president, to pass these LGBTQ laws for same-sex marriage and stuff. And then also he compares investment opportunities in Ukraine to unicorns. And he calls Ukraine a place where miracles come true. Okay, this is his little pitch to get investors to invest in Ukraine or whatever. And at first, when I first heard this, okay, that's silly, because he compared it to other unicorns like Apple or Amazon or whatever. It's like, what? Ukraine is going to be the next Apple? So in one sense, I think that's silliness. In another sense, they are, because he talked about also digitization of the country, which was one of his promises when he was running for president, that he wanted to. And when I first heard that, I was like, yes, because if you understood bureaucracy, when I was first in Ukraine for many years, every year I had to renew my missionary visa. Eventually, then it was a marriage visa, then it became permanent residence. But anyhow, it was just like every year, the system was different. It was all paperwork. Sometimes you had to pay a small bribe just to get something done. And it was just, it felt prehistoric. So when he started talking about digitizing thing, I thought, oh, he's just trying to modernize the country. But later, when I realized what this whole DIA app stuff is, where they want to have CBDCs centralize everything into one app, you might think of it as like a WeChat for Ukraine that they're going to then develop here and then take it and export it to other countries. Then I became greatly concerned. So the thing is, even if we gave the current government the benefit of the doubt that what they're trying to do is a good thing, trying to make things convenient and safe, but when he's such chummy chum with BlackRock, WF, Justin Trudeau, it gets very highly suspect. Let's pretend he's naive. Let's pretend the current administration has the best of intentions for the country. If you're going to consolidate everything, people's personal information, payments, loans, taxes, etc., voting, petitioning into one app, and over time, of course, that will be the only way to do it. Future regimes, which are evil, can easily take advantage of this and control people. People should have control of their own information, their own data. It shouldn't be controlled or even have access to by any corporations or by any centralized government. People should have it. Of course, governments have certain things in their databases, but they should not have access to block you, censor you, fine you, limit your travel, or whatever. So this, to me, I think should be a very, very high concern to Ukrainians. Whether he's a good guy, whether he has good intentions or not, this should be an absolute no. This should be as big of a problem in people's minds if they understood how dangerous it was to Yanukovych. And I really wish that people understood that. So and then when Zelensky spoke at the World Economic in 2023, it was from a much different perspective in the middle of the war. He's basically talking about the European Union and NATO expansion to help stop the Russian aggression. And of course, Klaus Schwab calls it unprovoked. This is another buzzword, unprovoked aggression. Well, yes, I consider them the aggressor, but I don't think we can say they were not provoked at all. When you're arming a nation right next door since 2014, training their soldiers, and whenever they would make any demands, I'm not saying their demands were legit, you just stonewall them. Whenever they tried to negotiate about NATO, you made no concessions at all. How can you call that unprovoked when you're trying to make the country right next to them that they consider in their minds, whether it's true or not, a sacred space to the Rus people, a sacred space to their history and to their religion? Even if it's BS, we all know it's BS from them, but still, they're just not going to let you have it, even if it was just a matter of it being a buffer state or not. So anyways, back to Zelensky. So I'm just going to kind of go through and list off some things I know about him, both pros and cons. When he became a president, he put many of his personal friends in high offices, which many people critiqued. And there have been certain far-right leaders in Ukraine in the past who've asked questions like, why are all the oligarchs, not all, but most of them, Jews? I think Akhmetov, who's actually the richest oligarch in Ukraine, is probably one of the only exceptions to that. I'm not sure, I actually have to check, but it would be kind of weird if somebody got made president, they put all their childhood friends into high positions, and they were all of the same nationality. I mean, if you're in a country where, or ethnicity, excuse me, if you're in a country where everyone is primarily of the same ethnicity, then it makes sense. But if you're in something that's more of a melting pot of Ukrainians, Russians, Jews, Tartars, even a little bit of Hungarians and Muslims, I don't know, but I think back in the early days of the U.S., they had what was called the spoil system, where people would get elected to president, and then they'd put all their friends and family in high offices. And later there was kind of measures to curb this somewhat. It still happens to a degree, but it really bothers me personally, because it's like, why can't you take the time to find someone who's qualified, who sincerely, genuinely actually merits the position? So Zelensky had one of his childhood friends, and he was one of his friends who worked with him in his comedy television show, and he made him the head of the secret services of Ukraine. I mean, I could understand maybe certain positions, but the head of secret services, your comedy childhood friend, is suddenly going to be the boss of intelligence. That is insane. Like, what the it? Well, later actually he was fired or forced to resign because of him not being able to do his job well, and I'm not sure, but that might have had something to do with pro-Russian governor and a few other guys under him in the Kherson region, which collaborated with the invading Russians, removed landmines from the bridge coming from Crimea to the Kherson region, and might have been one of the reasons why the Russians said that the people were going to greet them with flowers and stuff as rescuers, because they did have people, like 3 or 4 guys in Kherson. They had a guy in Kharkiv who was pro-Russian. The Odessa governor was pro-Russian. So they did have certain people in places that were going to help the Russians, not to mention the Russian Orthodox, or the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy, which we'll talk about in the second half of this video. But why would you put that guy in this position? That's just crazy to me. So another guy that he put in, the prime minister ended up resigning because there was a leaked video of just him talking in different meetings, and it was pointing out that he was saying that both him and Zelensky were incompetent in economic matters. So here we have Zelensky talking at the World Economic Forum. I mean, of course, what do you expect the guy? It's not a shame to not be an expert in economics. It's a shame to pretend you are when you're not. And I don't necessarily think he's doing that, but my point is that, do they understand what they're doing by giving all the IMF, allowing them to make these privatization laws in Ukraine, open up sweetheart deals for guys like BlackRock, Vanguard, Citigroup, Soros to come in and invest in the corporations and the land and all that. So, and then they're building this Dia app. And if you go to the guy who's like the head over this development of the Dia app, he has a Twitter post talking about the year 2030, like has this futuristic kind of mock-up video of Kiev or something. And he's received $650,000 of aid from USAID, headed by Samantha Power. And you might want to dig into the people that are actually giving into this in the background. So there are a lot of sketchy characters involved with this, and it makes it sound like it's humanitarian and stuff. So all that said, there are a lot of issues with Zelensky, a lot of things we should keep our eye on. But what I want people to understand is that he could just be being pressured, used. He could be naive, not really understand. Because in the video clips I'll show you, I think you'll agree with me. I'm not an expert in body language, but he seems to be sincere. He seems to be a simple guy, even though he's a millionaire. He seems to really genuinely love his family, and I think he genuinely loves Ukraine. And a lot of the things that he does, like he shut down 3 TV stations that were owned by oligarchs because they passed a law to shut down oligarch influence on politics. He suspended 11 political parties which were pro-Russian or communist. He consolidated during the wartime all the news channels into one 24-hour, 24/7 news channel. A lot of the things he's done, like the first thing he did when he got in office was dissolve the parliament so they could have early elections for parliament. And then his party ended up getting 43% of the chairs in parliament. That was before the war. It kind of seems like you could see it 2 ways. Either he's doing what's necessary in a time of war, but coincidentally, those things he's doing could also be interpreted to be centralizing his power. But the only way to know, I mean, it might be tempting when you have this power, is I seriously doubt he's going to try to do something like Putin did, where he tries to stay president for 20 years. I very, very highly doubt it. However, he could do a lot of damage in the time he's in office right now by what he's doing with these globalists and what he's doing with these investors, whether he's keen to it or not. So everyone knows that he was connected to Kolomoisky. He's been fighting corruption. I mean, imagine in this wartime, you have guys who were defecting to the Russians, helping the Russians, And then you have a general who's receiving money and aid, and he's embezzling it. He's like paying way more money for the food than it's worth. And then he basically gets a kickback from the guy he paid it to, and they hide it somewhere. That's essentially what Seymour Hersh is accusing Zelensky of doing with oil, but he has absolutely can't show any proof. So he's fired at least 10 guys. They raided Kolomoisky's home. Everyone knows in the past that Kolomoisky supported Zelensky and is running for office. I talked to one soldier that I know about this, and he basically said that Zelensky's giving him the finger, okay? Maybe it's optics, because everyone knows they're connected. But if he can make it look like he's fighting him, then maybe this gives him a better public image. I don't know. Nobody can say for sure. But I know that right now, Kolomoisky's going to court. His bank was privatized, or not privatized, it was nationalized, and his Ukernafta oil and gas business was nationalized as well. This also concerns me, that we can just take people's businesses and then just make them properties of the state, and then we have these other big bankers coming in. What kind of sweetheart deals are they going to make with this stuff that's been nationalized? Like, when the Soviet Union fell apart, they privatized everything, and they did it in a clumsy way, made a mess, made it like the Wild West. But now they're going, that didn't work. Okay, we'll just take all the oligarch stuff and we'll nationalize it. That's not good either. Like, do you want to build a free market society or what? Like, there has to be other ways, other things you can do with these and clean them up. So, this is another concern of mine. But now, as far as is Zelensky a hero? I would say I would agree with the people that you'll hear from in this video later on, these other Ukrainians and American missionaries, that he deserves respect. I would say not the respect that a pastor would deserve, but the respect of a president. I'm the type of person who doesn't really put people on a pedestal. I don't really care who you are, Elon Musk or famous actor. I see you as another man, actually. Of course, I will respect you, and there's some people I look up to a lot more than others, but I really try not to put people on a pedestal that they don't belong on and see all men as sinners. So can we consider him a hero? In one sense, I would say no. I think that's a little extreme. In another sense, he did stay in the country and fight. Now, when I first heard this thing where he said, the fight is here, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. Is that how the quote goes? Something like that. I was kind of skeptical of this because it sounded like, I know he's an actor, and it sounded like something from a 1980s action movie. But then I watched some documentaries, interviews with him talking about this situation, and it seemed to me that he actually genuinely made a brave decision to stay, and that's what he did. And that this was actually a premeditated decision. Now, in another documentary I show where he shows where he's sleeping in this simple bed in his office, this seems a little suspect too. Like, really, that's where you're sleeping? I don't know. It could be just optics to show a juxtaposition of how he is and how Putin and Yanukovych were in their lavish, like excessively, inordinately lavish lifestyles. And then I would say he also likes to talk about his family in interviews. And I would say that there's nothing wrong with that. Now, some people accuse them of like appealing to emotion, but they're just humans who love their families and they're talking about it. Maybe he's making a conscious decision to humanize himself versus Putin, who doesn't really talk about his family. If he does, it's not really in a very good or loving way. So he's juxtaposing himself against that, perhaps. But that doesn't mean it's not genuine. It just means he's choosing to show what's genuinely in his heart. I don't think it's an act. If any of you are experts in reading body language, correct me, but it seems really genuine to me. I think as far as a non-Christian, it seems like an unbeliever. He seems just like a guy who is simply doing everything he can to win for the sake of his country, for the sake of his people, for the sake of his family. I think he genuinely respects the soldiers. Yes, he's let these investment bankers and these globalists kind of have the upper hand in Ukraine, but does he really have a choice? What else is he going to do? What else? I mean, put yourself in his shoes. Russia is literally bombing your cities. What else? What else? What other options does he have? I mean, he can't appeal to people that have good political views because they're not powerful on the global stage right now. I don't know that he would. I'm just saying the option doesn't really look available to him. So maybe if we gave him the benefit of the doubt, we could say that he's simply just doing everything he can out of desperation to win this war, to stay positive, to stay motivated, do everything he can to get whatever help is necessary, keep out the propaganda, keep out the, any opposition that are going to create problems in the country, and simply fight to win. That could be one thing. The other thing could be that he actually knew beforehand America wanted to instigate this war with Russia, that he wanted to bring these investors in and these traders to, capitalize off of this horrendous situation at the expense. I mean, maybe they didn't know in advance how many people would die, but hundreds of thousands of lives, civilian lives, relocated or dead, and their homes completely destroyed. And now this dam where this oil came in with the water. Ukraine is an agricultural producer. Do you think Ukraine would do this to themselves and just sabotage all the money they could make from crops in that region? That just doesn't make any sense at all. So the two options seem very conniving. So I have to assume for the time being that, did I say the two options are conniving? No, one is very conniving and wicked. The other is just naive and genuine. It's godless, but it still has an element of Judeo-Christian morals and values in it, right? The other one is completely soulless and sketchy. And I don't really see any other options about how to view Zelensky. It's got to be one of those two. And a lot of conservative Americans, I say, they just jump to this one, this conclusion. If he is embezzling $500 million or more, if he is helping money launder the money that's being sent over, if he is involved in this scheme to digitize everyone's data and control everybody for the sake of this depopulation, this globalist agenda, well, he will answer to God, and I think in time these things will be made known. But for now, I think as Christians, we're called to a higher standard. I mean, this is one of the reasons the American judicial system was set up the way it was, because you need actual evidence. You're innocent till proven guilty, So I think we have to give him the benefit of the doubt. We have to try to help him, root for him in the face of this, and then hopefully somebody can steer those in Ukraine away from what the globalists are trying to do with Ukraine. I don't know if anything can be done, but I hope and pray that something could be done about that. So some people like Trump, DeSantis, Ramaswamy, even RFK Jr., they talk about getting us out of this war and stuff. So I don't agree with the way they've been helped. I think they've been helped in a sense that's dragged the war on so that the globalists and the big bankers, they can capitalize on it and make profit on it. And they just want to drag it out for the military industrial complex, where they want to sell more weapons, improve their weapons, overcharge for their weapons, pump the bags of the Congress, and keep their revolving door going into the lobbyist lounge, So, and there's far more incentives than that. There's a lot of ways they are profiting from this situation by letting it drag out instead of just, it's like, why do we have to have either corrupt help or no help? Really? And if it's America first, that means just forgetting about Ukraine. Why does America first mean forgetting about Ukraine? Why can't it be both and? You can't walk and chew gum at the same time? You can't send people in to help them with a decisive victory, over, boom, done. Really? Why don't we just help them win and be done with it? So anyway, this is just a theory, but I saw one video clip where Politician was talking about the CIA and Russia's nukes. And I suspect, time will tell if I'm right, that they know how well Russia's nukes work or don't work. They know how to stop them even, but they're not going to do it. So, anyways, that's my own harebrained tinfoil hat theory, but a conversation for another day. Anyway, I just think that it doesn't have to be help Ukraine in an unrighteous way versus forget about Ukraine. Why don't we help Ukraine in a righteous way, in such a way that actually does serve America? I mean, ultimately, it might seem far removed, but it does help us to love our neighbors. A lot of, when people are isolationists, I say, well, that sounds like the guy who asks, and who is my neighbor? The Bible says when it's in your power to help someone and you don't do it, it's a sin. The Bible talks about sins of omission. So America has meddled in a lot of countries' affairs in a wicked way for wicked profit. But that doesn't mean that as the most powerful, supposed to be Christian nation in the world, we shouldn't be helping nations with more of an altruistic, more of a motive out of love. I don't believe for a second these Democrats care about freedom and democracy. They crush your freedom and your democracy in a heartbeat by any means necessary, as long as they can get away with it. We've seen many evidences of that. So when they talk about, oh, we got to stand for freedom and democracy in Ukraine, this is a total farce. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. They just want the people. Why? So the mainstream media is hyping up Zelensky, talk about he's like George Washington or Winston Churchill or whatever. Maybe they overdo it. And this media has lied about so many different things. But the thing I want people to understand is they are not trying to get us to care about Zelensky because they think he's really that. They just want us to care about Ukraine so they can accomplish their agenda there. They're using Ukraine. They're toying with Ukraine. The American people, the Ukrainian people are nothing to these people. It's about the bottom line. It's about the agenda, right? And they appeal to people's emotions to get them to think a certain way. Well, they know people are going to protest to sending all this money over and weapons to Ukraine, right? So they got to come up, they got to hype it up. They got to paint it in a certain light. A few of them might mean it, and the people are just, oh, okay. So it's okay if all these illegal immigrants flood our country, but let's protect Ukraine's borders. Look, they don't care about Ukraine's borders either. They really don't. If they really cared about Ukraine's borders, they would have did something in 2014. So I don't think this is about Ukraine's borders, unless it's to push them out of Donbass and Crimea eventually because they want some of that oil and natural gas that's there. So I suspect that's a large part of the case, but that's a future step. I think they're hoping for more chaos inside of Russia, for Putin to lose his power and for Russia to fall apart from the inside before they make moves into that arena. So that's my personal opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Найскладніше, найостанніше і найскладніше. Я їх люблю. Безумовно, свою дружину. Мої діти, головні люди для мене. Не часто бачу. Батьки, їх зовсім не бачу. А дружиною пишаюсь дуже сильно. Вважаю, що вона робить все заради, я просто розумію, що вона за людина, заради дітей і держави. Хотілося б, щоб трішки заради мене, а вже ж. Я так жартую. В серці вони всі є, в серці. І ви бачите, я вам сказав чесно, що це буде найскладніше. і тому не можу нормально вам відповісти. Головне їх не підвести. Головне, щоб моїми дітьми
So, what were you like when you were growing up as a little kid?
I think like all the kids, maybe with a little bit more power and speed, because I was always running, not to waste time. Yes,
Yeah,
not
so
to
you're
waste
always
time.
moving.
Always moving, yes.
Is that your character still? Like,
I think yes.
yeah.
I think yes.
And what was your dream as a kid? Did you have a dream, a job?
I think each morning I had another dream.
But you didn't want to be an actor as a kid?
No.
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 Really?
No.
So, Elena, did you meet her when you were young?
Yes, when we've been 70. We love each other. I think my wife, is my best friend.
I read that she was nervous about when you decided to run for president.
Yes.
She was like, really?
Yeah, she didn't want, like, she understood that our family will not have the same life like it was before.
Do you get to see your family a little bit, or is it impossible?
Sometimes I have, for example, 4-6 hours to be with them, and
It's so little, it's so hard for you.
it's very hard for my son because, this age.
So how old is he now?
He's 9.
No, it's a
so
tough age, yeah.
for him, it's really tough situation because he needs father,
Yeah,
and now he doesn't have enough warm
yeah,
moments.
yeah. What do you say to him? How do you explain the situation?
He's in the soldier form. He
Really?
loves it.
Really?
Oh yes, it's all.
He's ready.
He's always ready. This war also changed our people and changed our children.
Yeah.
They are not children. They are adults.
Kids all through the country, I guess they have had to grow up so fast.
Yes, and our children has grown up very fast. Really. My son, he, said to me that I'm strong, I'm okay, do your job. Yes, but at this moment you see, вологі очі wet, and you see wet eyes of your son, and you understand that he's a child.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we go.
Ми не можемо не затронути тему крейсер Москва. Це не вирішальна, але дуже символічна перемога. В чому символізм?
війна, то вона як той пиріг з Російською Федерацією. Ми не можемо її з'їсти. Рот порвеш, велика держава і велика за обсягом. Цю біду проковтнути складно. Треба розділити війну на шматочки. І це перемоги. Одна за одною, іноді паралельно, але більшість йде все ж таки послідовно. Послідовних подвигів, послідовних перемог. А Москва – це такий же шматок. І дуже важливо, психологічно мотивована перемога. Ця одна Москва, вона, напевне, не найголовніша для нас всіх. Але в цей момент це була найголовніша. В цей момент це була велика перемога. В цей момент це було потрясіння для Москви. Тієї, що від цієї нічого не залишилось. І словосполучення «Москва – це дно» отримала практичну відповідь, практичний результат. Тобто в цьому є серйозні психологічні кроки.
Пане президенте, що таке перемога?
Для нас перемога – територія, яка конкретно під захистом гарантій світової безпеки. Це дуже важливо. НАТО або інші безпекові речі, безпекові гарантії, вони дуже важливі, які з іншими державами, не з Росії, а з потужними державами, яким ми довіряємо. Дуже важливо, щоб цим державам ми довіряли. І щоб підписано було так, щоб воно працювало, щоб навіть ніхто не думав наступати або щось у нас забирати, бо, як то кажуть, прилетить. Людина, яка втратила дитину або чоловік, мати, будь-кого серед своїх рідних, близьких, вона повинна отримати що? Справедливість. Це що? Десь це відшкодування, десь це вирок вбивцям, десь іще якісь кроки. На рівні міжнародного суду, на рівні серйозних процесів. Не якось там заочно, когось там десь, комусь якийсь дали вирок, а він десь там знаходиться, а де він знаходиться, що з ним, ми навіть не знаємо. Ні, зрозумілий вирок. І це, мені здається, ключові речі в цій перемозі.
А що нам робити з такими сусідами далі? Як нам жити?
Жити з цим сусідом, він нікуди не дінеться. Наше завдання – показати, що ми нікуди не дінемось і станемо міцніше, ніж ми були. У нас просто немає іншого виходу. Нам треба бути міцнішими, ніж ми були. Перше. Друге – зробити все можливе, щоб послабити Російську Федерацію. Треба відстояти свою землю, деокупувати свою Україну. Тим самим, я вважаю, що це вже буде крок послаблення сусіда. Потім знайти гарантії безпеки, бажано Міжнародний союз безпековий. І подивимось, як вони нас будуть брати в НАТО або не будуть брати. Але тим не менш, я думаю, що у нас, скажімо так, високі шанси побудувати міжнародні гарантії безпеки для нас. Ми повинні зробити найбезпечнішу державу у світі. Я вважаю, що у нас для цього на сьогодні є все. Бажання людей і досвід, великий досвід. І третє – це люди, які об'єдналися навколо нас, держави, інші лідери, які бачать, що це потрібно. Трьох цих речей достатньо, щоб це побудувати.
За рік війни і за десятиріччя подорожей я ніде більше не відчував такого піднесеного святкового духу, як у Херсоні в перші дні на площі. Це було щось неймовірне. І
На
знаєте,
площі круто.
і що я подумав? Я подумав, що я точно знаю тепер, де я буду почувати себе ще краще. Це в день нашої перемоги, коли таке і ще більше буде по всій країні.
Ну так, ну слухай, мені здається, це катарсис.
Що стосується особистого, от як ви зараз спілкуєтесь, наприклад, з батьками? Що вам каже мама, що вам каже папа, коли ви телефонуєте? Це ж батьки, вони дуже переживають.
Дуже. Ну, мої батьки, вони все знають, вони знаходяться тут, ну, в Україні, у себе вдома. І мама завжди каже, мені здається, ті самі питання, як я, чи я поїв. І все нормально. А батько каже, слідкуємо, молодці, добивайте їх.
Батько каже, Володя, будь обережний.
Мати каже, будь обережний. Да. А батько каже, молодці, ну там вже пора закінчувати, ви вже їх перемогли. Ну давайте вже трішки ще натисніть.
Батя молодець.
Так, він з перших днів війни каже, ну вже ж по телевізору показали, вже зрозуміло, що ви скоро ви їх витиснете, ну у них шансів нуль. Ну, приблизно в такому настрої.
Нас неможливо перемогти з таким.
Не можна.
Ви вибачайте, що коли у вас запищав телефон, мої очі подивились. Мені просто цікаво було, хто у вас на робочому столі, якщо це коректне питання.
Це мій син і донька.
Син і донька.
А чекаю я завжди дзвінок дружини, ну, щоб вона не образила зараз.
Дякую вам. Дякую.
Тобі комфортно? Мені не дуже. Я сиджу, ти стоїш.
Мені цікаво.
Не можеш тут сісти?
Я можу.
Тут дипломати сидять.
Виявилось, що кабінет президента – це не просто робоче місце. Тут цілий комплекс, де можна і жити, і працювати. В цих кімнатах створені всі умови для того, щоб президент міг у прямому сенсі жити на роботі.
Отут я живу.
Тут ви живете?
Отут. Головне місце моє ось тут.
Я не знаю, я думаю, люди можуть багато не повірити, що маленьке ліжко таке.
Нормальне ліжко.
Ну, нормальне ліжко.
Мені достатньо. Абсолютно.
I have seen a variety of opinions about Volodymyr Zelensky online. Some say he's an absolute monster, that he's corrupt, that he can't be trusted, that he's in cahoots with the globalists, and others view him as a hero, or they say he's just the man for the hour, or an ideal example of leadership. In your opinion, how should we view President Zelensky?
I try to be I'm kind of like sometimes can be a fanatic person, so I was fall in love in our previous president, then disappointed, so I try to keep me far from emotions. So I realized that Zelensky definitely the human being, and I like him personally, but I still try to remind myself that all can do mistakes. I'm sure like 99% or I would say 100, as just a human I can be mistaken, but that's it. But he's not Nazi for sure. And it's I honestly I will not do this right now, but I think before this we need to all agree what we mean Nazi, because even here this word using a lot, and some Ukrainians call Russians Nazi, some of them call us. So it's, but no, in all, I guess in all meanings of this word, he's not Nazi. It's, by the way, to this topic, it should to say that actually before this war, he was one of the, I would say in the middle. So there were many Ukrainians who, not many, but there were a lot of Ukrainians who were claiming him that he is not enough patriotic. So actually it is really stupid to blame him that he's against nations, because he never been a part. We have a really, not Nazi, just more, correct me if it's wrong, but nationalistic parties. But he's never been among the, he never been pro-Russian, but he was kind of like in the middle to like unite people. And it's like, I know some probably like in the Senate or like in parliament, some people who always like kind of had a, not Nazi, but nationalistic ideas. Zelensky is, and his party and the people whom he put it like as ministers is like very far from the idea of not even Nazi, just the simple nationalistic ideas. And like people with whom you're chatting about Zelensky, again, like I don't live with him. I don't his wife. I'm not his wife. And I can't say if he did mistakes in the life or not. I also don't think that Trump is a saint and he didn't do any mistakes or something, but I don't see that he's like completely corrupted or like, look on his face, man, he is looking terrible. All the time when I see him, I so sad about him, and I'm so sorry about him. I feel like, yeah, when I hear his interviews, I just can't watch it because I'm so sad that he's need to go through all of these things. And it's like, I'm not sure that I could do this. I'm a Christian. I have a faith.
From the beginning, I perceived these promises as impossible, like to remove everybody from the office and put all the new people on the offices, like from the top till the end. Like it's impossible. Man, where you could find trained people for all these positions in order to put them just right away. So I don't think it's possible to do it just like this. But also I agree that it could work faster. The process could go on faster, and there are problems with the current government, and there are like many problems which we didn't bring it up right now. I mean, not just personally we, but generally speaking, Ukrainian society, because of the war, and we don't want to destabilize situation so much that we would have some like fights among different parties inside Ukraine because we have external enemy and we are in the state of war. But I think after the war, after our victory, we will have a lot of questions. So yeah, it's interesting in the light of this, fight between Democrats and Republicans in the United States, how they perceive information. I would disagree personally. I would disagree that he's like second Winston Churchill. I would disagree with this claim. Nevertheless, I should admit that he deserved respect for what he was doing. And I don't think he had some like 100% guarantee that he would be okay when he made this decision. Like, I don't think it would possible to give such a guarantee back then. And nevertheless, he decided to stay, and he deserves some respect for this. And he did a lot of good things, good communications. There are a lot of questions, especially before full scope invasion. And after full scope invasion, my personal opinion about him become better. And I think it's just, stupid to ignore positive things which he have done. Flaws, problem, and maybe in the future we will see like more of them and more of the flaws, more of the poor decisions. Nevertheless, he's the president of our country. He stayed with his people, and he represents our interest on the international level. And so far, he did it successfully. And also, I think the one plus which we could say about him, that he is comparatively to previous presidents, he is more sensitive to the people, to the opinion of people, which is good things. Of course, it would have like two sides. Yes, if it's too extreme, it's also bad. If he dependent only on the public opinion of the people, but it has a positive side. He's sensitive. He tries somehow to respond to the needs of people. He tries to see what people actually are saying. He have a team who actually follow the social media, who try to be in touch with the Ukrainian people, which is also positive. Because before, whom we have, maybe we could say that Poroshenko also tried to do something about it, if we compare him to Yanukovych or Yushchenko or Kuchma or Kravchuk, but he wasn't so successful as Zelensky. And it's just a matter of time. We have a lot of questions to him, especially a lot of questions before the 21st of February. But he stayed with Ukrainian people and did everything in order that we could, for example, communicate right now. Is he a hero? Like for now, we would say yes, but what would be in the future, we will see.
So you remember when he was running for president, some people liked him, probably less than half liked him. Everyone else liked his shows, you know. What was the show he was in? It was like a Saturday Night Live thing. Anyway.
Yeah, some sitcom.
He's in the sitcom where he's a teacher that becomes president and all that. And anyway, he was like, but his response after the war and his firm resolve and, you know, his fighting for Ukraine, I think he's earned his place up there. People can say, like, again, it's kind of hard to get mad at the guy. He's fighting for his country. He's the president of a nation, and he's doing everything he can to make sure that they are protected. What's wrong with that? You know, people say he's pandering to Hollywood, or he's, you know, remember in War Games, the guy said, hell, I'll piss on a spark plug if I think it'd do any good. Yeah, he's doing what it takes to protect his nation. Otherwise, Ukraine would be overrun with Russia by now. I mean, it would be Russians everywhere. Ukraine would be gone. It'd be a lost nation, and there would be other nations on the line. So kudos to him. Yeah, he's a hero. He's doing the right thing. And you know what do we expect him to do? I'm not saying he's not a saint. I'm not saying he's perfect. I don't know if there's corruption involved or not, but he's out there. He's on the front lines. He's standing arm in arm with the soldiers. He's getting the money. He's getting the weapons. Again, he was attacked. We were attacked, Ukraine. So he's doing what it takes to protect the people that he was elected to protect. So good for him. I think I like him.
In general, he proved to be a true leader of the nation in the hardest times that we could imagine. And no one expected it from him, because he is not from military. He's not even from politics. He was a businessman, a comedian, and he proved to be a true leader, to inspire people. I think that a big part of that Ukraine stood was that Zelensky did the right moves. He didn't left Kiev when it was there was a direct threat to his life, and the odds were not in his favor. And he stood his ground. He commanded. He remained in charge and commanded. And he goes to the lines, to the front, and inspires people. And I think, yeah, without such a leader, I don't know how bad the things could go. And this was, I suppose, a blessing from God that things turned this way, because I think no one could expect that it could go like that. So, in my personal opinion, Zelensky absolutely deserves to be called a hero, despite he's a person, and every person is controversial. Yeah, and I think one day he would be on banknotes of our hryvnias, because, you know, he's a real historical figure, because he led the nation in the toughest time, and in the times when I think that nation born. So, yeah, because when people not only say words about nation not trying to build it, but they're risking their life. Yeah, it's the times when the nation was born, I suppose, and Zelensky was in the lead of this. So yeah, in my opinion, he's a hero. And as for his connections, well, you know, throw a stone who has seen.
I think at this point, the best thing is to give him credit for what he's done. In my personal opinion, Zelensky figure was a key factor in Ukraine's resistance and resilience early days in the war. Also, he raised the publicity around Ukraine significantly in the world. And it seemed like Ukraine became so popular that the whole world was talking about Ukraine and was talking about supporting Ukraine. By doing so, they also put pressure on their governments to do something about the situation, the people of various nations. And it was a good thing. It was absolutely needed. So I think he was the guy for that time for Ukraine, and I give him credit for that. As far as his presidency prior to war, I have a lot of questions about it. There were no charges, to my opinion, to my knowledge, of him being involved in any corruption. Yes, he endorsed the appointments of some guys with very questionable reputation, or seemed like he was covering their corruption, but I don't think there were any charges to him directly in corruption. Now it looks like he lets the military guys do their job, and that is what's needed. I would agree with those pastors who would say that let's just wait till the end of the war and then we'll deal with him. I think it's wise, because he's, at the moment, it doesn't look like he's in the way of Ukraine getting its victory, but any turmoil, any disturbance at that point would hurt Ukraine more than anything else. So I would agree with them. Keep the guy in, give him credit for what he has done in the beginning of the war, and continues to do as far as inviting and welcoming and asking for donations and help in military and humanitarian aspects. And yeah, and if he's corrupt or he was covering corruption, I do believe that it will need to be dealt with after the war is over, without any hesitation.
Talking about Zelensky and his ability to make friendship, I don't know. I didn't vote for him. I didn't, and I think it was a stupid move from the most of the voters who vote for him to vote him in the office. From his side, I think it was completely irresponsible move to become a president of the country, which is in a war, which he has no clue how to govern actually. And you know, besides his personal charisma and charm, he can read the text which were written for him. That's it. It's probably the only one his gift.
He stayed in Ukraine rather than evacuating, and a lot of people have really boosted him up for this. And I'm like, that's not a big deal, guy. He's a president. He's in a country at war. No man between the ages of 16 and 60 is allowed to leave the country. He is within that age group. He did not leave. It would be a very bad leadership move for him to evacuate the country. So whenever people pump him up on those grounds, I'm like, that's kind of expected. When people smash him because he is going to the West and asking for finances and support, I don't think that's inappropriate, not in the least bit. Did we shame President Bush whenever America went into Afghanistan and Iraq, and President Bush appealed to European countries to send soldiers as well, Ukraine being among those, by the way? No, not at all, right? Perfectly acceptable for a president to appeal to other nations for help. The situation in Ukraine is rather dire, so Zelensky is having to go to some rather some bad guys, if you will. NATO has a lot of leftists behind it, right? We got a lot of leftist ideology going around Europe. We got it in America. He's doing a good job, though. By the way, it's a good thing that the president was not a politician. It's a good thing that the president made his bones in the acting world. It's a good thing that his predecessor, Poroshenko, whose entire term in office was under war, by the way, it's a good thing that he was a businessman, right? Selling Roshin, the chocolate company, right? The Russian-influenced politics of Ukraine that were characteristic of Ukraine for so long after the fall of the Soviet Union was a world of corruption, and the people that rose to the top in there were corrupt, Yanukovych being the pinnacle of all that. So it's a good thing that it's not someone that came out of Ukrainian politics who became the president. It's a good thing that it was someone from outside the political world that came in. So whenever people attack Zelensky because, oh, he's an actor, he's not a politician, I don't think they know what they're asking for. Would you rather have someone that was working for Putin for so long, working against America for so long? Or would you rather have someone that the Ukrainian people love on his own merit apart from politics?
Ukraine is free country, and every journalist could come, and see independent journalists, big social media, big media, so they could come and see the real situation in Ukraine. But if we are talking about Zelensky, to be honest, before the war, I didn't support Zelensky because it was not my not my politician. I didn't support him, but we could see that during the war he showed himself as a real president, as real man with common for us as Ukrainian values. So he loves Ukraine, he loves Ukrainian, he trying to get this independency for Ukraine, as we all wish to get this independency. So he's hero for sure, as a hero for Ukrainian nation, as Churchill was hero for Britons. But he's usual man, so he made some mistakes for sure before war and during the war. So he's a sinful man, right? But we support him as president of Ukraine right now, and we see him as a good president right now. And many of his decisions was really important for Ukrainian independence and freedom. So yeah, but I'm sure that after the war, our position of Ukrainian will change, because Ukrainian very critical nation. They will not support person just because he is hero. People will find some mistakes and will vote for someone others and so on. So yeah, he is hero for Ukrainian people, and I would say for Europe too. But he is usual man who could make some mistakes and so on.
I think I should be cautious about this word hero, because for me now the heroes are those people, our soldiers, our medicians who are in the region of Donbass, who fight, who in the fierce combats with Russians, people who risked their lives and evacuated people from these regions in the beginning of the war. They are for me heroes. As for Zelensky, well, I can only see his personality from the insider's point of view, because I don't know enough about his connections with Western politicians. I have heard about Biden's family. I have read something about it, but still I have too few information about it to say something on this issue. But for me, Zelensky now is, I think it's right person on this time, because he refused to leave Ukraine in the first days or first hours of the full-scale war. He did a lot to gain the to win the information war, because he accumulated. Well, he spoke to many people in Western countries. He went to the USA to speak to Biden to ask for weapons. He due to his skills as a good performer and his ability to communicate, I think he got a lot of support from the West, and I think in this moment it's very important. As for us, there are a lot of people whom I know that say, you know, Zelensky was warned by the British and the American special services just several months before the war that the war is very possible. You should do something. And I think that, and I think personally, we should have prepared for this war beforehand, not after we have got the information from Great Britain or the USA on this issue, but beforehand, and to understand that Russia is not about to stop. First, they took control over Donbas and Lugansk region and Crimea, and I think, and a lot of military officers share this opinion, that it was only the beginning, that we should have been preparing for this war in 2014 till this time. But both Poroshenko and Zelensky, they partly failed because they say, okay, it's maybe we can close this as a local conflict, and Russia will not go forward and have some other aims to occupy Ukraine. But I think we should have been prepared just many years ago, and that's why I think that Zelensky's failure was not to hear to this information from the Western countries and to prepare his own country. It's only I'm very grateful to those people in the north of region Kiev, in region Kharkiv, Donbas, and so on, who oppressed this invasion in the very beginning of this war. But I think we could have saved a lot of people's life when we have done something to protect ourselves. So for me, Zelensky is a good person now, because he does a lot to for Ukraine to make it to oppress to have this war against Russia, against this invasion. But I think he should have done something to avoid it.
I would say yes. Now, hero does not mean that he is great in everything he does. In a significant sense, I would say yes, he's a hero because he stayed in Kiev when he knew they were coming for him. And he did it most immediately, I would say, for the country, for the sake of the country, because there was no way for him to know that he was going to make it out alive, that he would still be here weeks, months, a year later. So for that, yes, in my mind, he's a hero. He stayed, he didn't leave the ship when the ship was under attack, and he's still there today. I think he's had a terrible year, personally, emotionally. I think he's been through, is going through a really difficult time, but he is doing a great job in keeping people in Ukraine united, keeping people focused, getting international support. The third largest military in the world is attacking his country, and he's fighting back. In my mind, he's a hero.
You should think of him as a president that does the thing he's supposed to do. He's definitely not a hero. I am greatly and thoroughly against the idea of making him a hero.
It's hard to answer this question. I personally have respect to him for what he has already done for Ukraine, talking about diplomatic work, and he did an awesome job. And he was a media person for most of his life, and he is very talented in doing that. And it's easy for him to find common things with people and to find connection. And because of him, we have a lot of support. But I know I'm definitely aware of how corrupt Ukraine is. And I would say that this corruption does not go away now. I don't know what a president has to do to start fighting this, and how possible it is, and how fast it is possible to do this. And I also felt that there were some laws that were made during the war and were not supporting small businessmen, because instead of giving small businessmen more freedom to work and to support Ukraine with their taxes, their life got harder. to the war, and the government was not helping them. So there are good and bad things people can say about Zelensky. Also, some of his closest people are considered to be questionable, and some people say, "Hey, why does not he kick those out of his cabinet office?" But and we don't know why. Time will show who Zelensky really is, but he is definitely better than other presidents that we had, because we see how he is able to help provide support for Ukraine.
I think he has unrealistically heavy burden because of the war, if I can say so, and such work in such time physically drains a life as much as possible, and it's a fact. Was he ready for such events? Would he run for the president if he knew? I'm not sure, but Poroshenko is a person who cooperated with Russia and only wanted to fill his pockets with money. And I'm really surprised how good Zelensky is working now. And I think he stands for Ukraine, and I really truly believe that he will bring us to the victory.
The funny thing, I didn't vote for Zelensky. I thought he was a crook when he came to power after Poroshenko. I was in favor of Poroshenko because he was rebuilding, well, tried to rebuild the army, brought this Thomas to Ukrainian church, and negotiated the deal that Ukrainians can go to the European Union without visas. And I said Zelensky is just is a hyped person, you know, and it was interesting to watch how 70% of the population voted for him. But the war changed everything. I mean, including my opinion about his party, or well, not his party, but himself, because it was a huge evolution, if I may say so, in terms of his character. When he came to power, became a president, he wanted every, like, Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking, English-speaking, everyone living in Ukraine peacefully and stuff. He said he even I remember he even gave one of his inaugurative speeches in Russian, you know, saying that we need to have peace and stuff of that kind. And I thought of him back then. He was crazy, and still think some of the policies that were crazy back then. But again, huge change after the war. Before it was in Zelensky, before the war and after the war. And I think right now he's doing what he can. I obviously don't see the full picture, but from what I see, from what I research, it's definitely much better. It may have happened that he has some flaws, some drawbacks, but he performed well, in my opinion, from the beginning of this war, appointing good generals, appointing good ministers, or not appointing, I mean, agreeing or not, at least not vetoing new ministers. A minister of defense is a great guy. This general, you know, that Zelensky appointed is a great guy. Sirsky and others, you know, obviously flaws are there, drawbacks are there, but again, compared to what that to the bravery of the person, to what he does in the international arena, to what he does in terms of diplomacy, in terms of army, I think he had this process of rethinking his values, and I'm pretty sure I will vote for him in the next elections.
Judging from the things that he has done when the war started, I think we should respect him. We should respect him because he showed bravery, like in the face of this big, huge tragedy and threat. So that is why I think he was the leader who was in the right time and the right place. You know, he was able to unite the nation, to be constantly open, to talk with people, to provide information for them. So I would say that I started to respect him more. I know that you know, after the war it can be different because we have problems with corruption in our country, and sometimes I think it's harder to overcome the corruption than Russians.
Such words as heroes, I think, can only be really truly sent to those who actually fight. But I do have respect to Zelensky because, on my opinion, the way he acts during this full-scale war is respectful. He is really doing his utmost nowadays to bring all the world's attention to Ukraine, all the possible money to Ukraine, all the possible weapons to Ukraine. And again, we can't say that we don't know what we will get after this, like what it will lead us to. I mean, we will pay for all this by what? We don't know the answers. But at this right moment, we only have one big aim, is to actually fight Russia back and possibly, and it's an ideal situation, bring back the borders of 1991. I don't know if it's possible or not because I have big doubts about it, but that's of course the idealistic view. But I think Zelensky is being a president of this country. He didn't run away. He didn't show any fear, although I think he does feel it and felt it. But we also can see him traveling to really hotspots, like to Bakhmut, to Kherson region. He came to Kherson right after it was liberated, like same or next day, if I'm not mistaken. So he is being close to the people, and I don't see many reasons for hating him much. He cannot be responsible for all 30 years of independence in Ukraine. That's what I think.
The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not Russian, it's Ukrainian. It has no connection to the Putin government. It has in fact officially denounced the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So once again, there is no justification for destroying and banning this church. You remember when Russia invaded Ukraine in February, and at that time our leaders told us this wasn't some faraway conflict in Eastern Europe. This was our war. No military should ever be allowed to invade a sovereign nation, they told us. Iraq and Afghanistan obviously not included in that rule. The invasion of Ukraine could not stand because it was a matter of first principles. But more than that, it was a world historic moral battle that we were obligated to join. It was very clear Vladimir Putin was pure evil. He was Hitler reborn. The Ukrainian President Zelensky was his mirror image. He was saint-like, self-denying, brave, honest, very handsome. And Zelensky was fighting for the very same ideals that our country was founded on. A number of news outlets, including CNN and the LA Times, compared him to George Washington. So they told us that with one voice, month after month. No disagreement allowed. Not surprisingly, it worked. Americans fell hard for President Zelensky. They all did. Even in rural areas that voted against Joe Biden, you saw Ukrainian flags hanging from mailboxes. To many people, it felt like World War II again, the good war, a battle against tyranny abroad for the sake of freedom and democracy at home. Well, the better part of a year later, it's getting harder and harder to believe any of this. Whatever you think of the war in Ukraine, it is pretty clear that Zelensky has no interest in freedom and democracy. In fact, Zelensky is far closer to Lenin than to George Washington. He is a dictator. He is a dangerous authoritarian who has used $100 billion in U.S. tax dollars to erect a one-party police state in Ukraine. And that's not an overstatement. Over the past year, Zelensky has banned opposition parties. He shut down critical media by force. He's arrested his political opponents. He has sent soldiers into churches. Zelensky's secret police have raided monasteries across Ukraine, even a convent full of nuns, and arrested dozens of priests for no justifiable reason whatsoever and in clear violation of the Ukrainian constitution, which no longer matters. And in the face of this, the Biden administration has said nothing, not one word. Instead, they just continue to push to send Zelensky more tax dollars. So naturally, Zelensky has become much bolder. Why wouldn't he? Last week, he announced his plan to ban an entire religion, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and to seize its property, all for being insufficiently loyal to his regime. And he said it out loud. Watch this.
Маємо створити такі умови, коли
We have to create such conditions when any people dependent on the country aggressor won't be able to manipulate Ukrainians and weaken Ukraine from within. First, the National Security and Defense Council instructed the government to submit to the Verkhovna Rada, a draft law on making it impossible for religious organizations affiliated with centers of influence in the Russian Federation to operate in Ukraine.
A free country does not ban a major religion just because it's not fully on board with the political program of the people running the country. But Zelensky's doing that, and his cabinet is now devising ways to punish Christians for practicing their banned ancient religion in Ukraine. Quote, personal, economic, and restrictive sanctions will be applied to any Christian caught worshiping in unapproved ways. Now, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is more than 1,000 years old. With the full backing of the Joe Biden administration and the U.S. Congress, Zelensky has decided to ban it. So here's the response of one bishop to the news. You're not allowed to send soldiers into churches. You're not allowed to arrest dozens of priests because they refuse to bow before you. You're not allowed to ban whole religions. So most of the U.S. media, most, have just ignored this. Some have made excuses for it. Oh, he has to do this because there's a war. But there's no justification for this whatsoever. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not Russian, it's Ukrainian. It has no connection to the Putin government. It has, in fact, officially denounced the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So once again, there is no justification for destroying and banning this church. And yet Zelensky's many celebrity backers in the West have said nothing about it. And they should know better. In May, George W. Bush, the great defender of Christendom, met with Zelensky on a Zoom call and afterward described him as the Winston Churchill of our time, a man who should be praised for his, quote, commitment to liberty. So where's George W. Bush on this question, now that his friend, the George Washington of Ukraine, has banned a form of Christianity in that country? Well, George W. Bush has been silent as well. So have many purportedly Christian members of Congress. They're backing Zelensky no matter how many Christians he arrests, no matter how many churches he seizes.
Okay, so now we're going to address the question, is Zelensky attacking Christianity? In my opinion, it's just completely absurd. First of all, I'm not going to get all the dates exactly right. 1917, I think religion was abolished in the USSR when the Bolsheviks took over, completely abolished. Later on, Stalin came into power. It was after World War II where he began to realize there were still a lot of people in the country who had deep roots of Christianity, so to speak, and he realized that it was even harder to control people in Western Ukraine who were Greek Catholic. That's Orthodox ceremony that acknowledges the papal authority, in case you didn't know. So he was like, well, how do I control these people? So what he did was he revived, that's not the right word, he instituted the Russian Orthodox Church as the official church of the Soviet Union, and no other churches were allowed. And then they went to Western Ukraine and they forced all the bishops and priests to either convert or, I think some of them were killed, sent to gulags, exiled, imprisoned, etc., etc. Some of them hid in the forest and tried to keep practicing and everything. So first for a while, there was no church at all. Then he reinstituted the Russian Orthodox Church. And then in 1991, two major Ukrainian Orthodox denominations rose up. I think it's the Ukrainian Autocephalous, I'm not sure, church, and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchy. And later on, I think it was 2018, those two merged into one. And then also you had in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy. So in Tucker Carlson's video, he says that this is independent of Russia. This is complete nonsense. So if anyone has followed Kirill, who's the patriarch of the the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, he graduated seminary in '69, I think it was, and has worked up the ranks in the KGB, and he's still there. And he's talking about how their church is fighting the Antichrist, that Putin is a miracle of their day, that anyone who dies in this war is going to go to heaven. He makes it like a holy war where you will, if you die in it, you're saved. So these are not only heresies, these are where the purpose of the church is not to truly disciple people, but to just make them, to further Putin's agenda and to idolize him, right? So now, it gets complicated because there are many churches in Ukraine that are Russian Orthodox of the Moscow Patriarchy who disagreed with his Kirill's approval of the war. And some of them actually in 2018, joined the Ukrainian Orthodox, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the OCU. So those two major Ukrainian denominations merged into one, and a few of the Moscow Patriarchy churches joined it as well. And I believe it was 7,000 churches versus 12,000 when the war began in 2014. So they had almost half as many churches and twice as many parishioners. And then when the war started, most of the patriarchs in Ukraine openly condemned the war from the Moscow Patriarchy denomination, but Kirill openly promoted the war. And then they separated, supposedly, from the Moscow Patriarchy Church. And then eventually in January of this year, they have this huge land area in Kiev, this lease where they get a special kind of sweetheart deal on it. And Zelensky and his administration did not extend this lease. Then he officially banned them. Why did he ban them? Well, not all of them, but some of them were promoting the Russians, speaking well about Putin, hiding Russian passports and other information. They were harboring Russian soldiers at some point. Some churches, I think, had weapons in them. And so, I mean, actually, I believe in freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of the speech with all my heart. But there are laws against fraud, against slander. They are a state agency in a time of war that's trying to help the enemy kill people in their country. We should all be against this. I mean, sometimes America is so free that it's to their own detriment, where they have enemies of the state, people who hate America get into office. I think that's a little bit too free. So anyway, the thing is, he's not attacking Christianity. In Russia, in 2016, they banned all freaking sects, Jehovah's Witnesses, Protestants, etc., etc. They banned it all. And they find various ways of persecuting them. I won't go into all the stories, but then in Ukraine, everyone's free to practice their religion as long as they're not trying to help the Russian army kill people in the country. I don't see how that is attacking Christianity. It's just completely absurd. So they didn't extend this lease. They banned the practice of it. I forgot to mention that when the war began, a whole bunch of more of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchal priests joined the the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. So that even accelerated more because they were against the war. So it's not so simple to say they're all FSB agents or they're all a front for the state agenda in Russia, because some are and some aren't. And it's so difficult to know which ones are and which aren't. That's why intelligence raids their buildings. So I don't really see that there should be a problem with that. So a lot of us know, thanks to Tucker Carlson, about the Moscow Patriarchy Ukrainian Orthodox Church being banned in Ukraine. And Tucker Carlson claimed that Zelensky was actually attacking Christianity. In your understanding, is Zelensky attacking Christianity? And can you help us understand this issue a little bit better?
I heard a lot of things, but it just makes me smile because they can say whatever you want to hear. Anything you want to hear, they will say for you. And the Church of Moscow Patriarchate is not the Church of God for sure. Realistically, I say from my own experience, this is some kind of union of KGB of Russia inside of Ukraine, really. Constant political rhetorics, ignoring Ukrainians in Ukraine, and inciting in might. That's what the so-called church is about. And I do not understand why they were allowed to be in our territory for so long. This is a church of discord, I think. A long time ago, there were Ukrainian and Moscow Orthodox Church on the Ukrainian territory, and most of the good churches and good buildings that were built hundreds of years ago were taken by Moscow Patriarchate, and on these territories, on these buildings inside of they are talking about Russia and stuff like this. Understand what I'm saying? So it's not correct. You can go to your house and speak what you want. Don't come to our. And now people from Ukraine, Ukrainians, they said, we have Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Everything is mostly same as Russian. Please let these people go. We want to go only in Ukrainian church.
Oh, no, I don't think that he's attacking Christians. I think he's attacking traitors. I know that he is actually regularly meets with those leaders, spiritual leaders, and leaders of the churches in Ukraine. So I think it's a good sign. I know the story from the friend of mine that she attended the church, the Orthodox church from it was Moscow. How do you call it? Moscow Patriarchy, or like it was managed by Moscow, as now that church in Lavra in Kiev, but she attended this church here in Odessa. And during the revolution of Euro Revolution in 2014, she said that the priest and the member of the church, they had the plans about how to support Russians, and they even have weapons. They said, if you need the weapons, we will give you the weapons. So I think that, I cannot say about all of them. So, and after that, they decided to leave that church, and they were really disappointed in the church and has never come back to any church, you know, not Protestant, not any other church. They said the church is a people institution and we won't trust it, because they said that we want to worship God, and actually they're trying to destroy their own country and kill their own people because they believe that Moscow is the ruler and they need support to support this. So I think as Putin uses Moscow Church, Orthodox Church, as a means of support, moral support for his politics and campaign, I think that the Moscow Church in Ukraine they should follow the directions of their leaders in Moscow, and they should support and them, and that is why I think it's really dangerous for us not to be aware of that, and not to be aware that some people are traitors, even if they don't think that they are traitors to their own country and their own nation.
You just can't explain everything about Ukraine easily, because what he's talking about Ukraine is actually true about Russia, because Russia has one dominant Orthodox church. And if you ban this church and persecute this church, then you are persecuting Christians. But Ukraine is multi-denominational, literally hundreds and thousands of different denominations. Anyway, the funny thing is that they're prescribing it to Zelensky or to Ukraine now. So they take a Russian actual story of, for example, him prohibiting Jehovah's Witnesses, banning Jehovah's Witnesses. We all have different, or maybe not different, same attitude towards Jehovah's Witnesses. But acting as if they are terrorists, that's a little bit insane. And so you have actually the story about Putin actually, persecuting opposition, and they are prescribing it to Zelensky when the court banned, former party of regions. So you don't really need to be creative. You just take Russia and say it's Ukraine. That's it.
If someone wants to say that, so one of the first things, if you look at what Tucker Carlson's video did, right? First thing he said, and it's not just like a cult like Scientology. It's the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. He is misleading people here. I don't know if he is unaware of the issues, if he is just ignorant, or if he is aware of the issues and he's lying about them and he's intentionally misleading people. But he's wrong, 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 wrong. So if somebody wants to say that Zelensky is oppressing, my first question is, oh, are you denying the cross? Well, the reason I say that is because the Russian Patriarch Kirill, came out last year and did a thing where he said that it is the church's position now that if someone dies in this war, this genocide against Ukrainians, then he has made the ultimate sacrifice, and the church would say that he has washed away his own sins by dying. This is not Christianity. When you remove Christ and make a person his own savior through his own death as opposed to Christ's death, this is nowhere near the biblical teaching. I would say that Eastern Orthodoxy as a whole is a false religion because it directs people away from trusting in Christ for eternal life, and it points them to believe in themselves, their own works for eternal life. Some would disagree. Some hold to the perspective that Eastern Orthodoxy is a salvific path, and I would disagree. However, regardless of where you stand on Eastern Orthodoxy, I think we need to recognize that Russian Orthodoxy is a cult of Eastern Orthodoxy. This statement by Kirill does not at all align with anything that any of the Eastern Orthodox church fathers would have spoken about over the course of centuries that my non-Russian Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox friends would appeal to. The notion of you dying for your own sins is entirely foreign to the Bible. It is antithetical to the Christian religion. These are not Christians in the proper sense of the word. It is, however, a propaganda branch of Russia. Whenever you are in a state of martial law, when you have a war going on, it is acceptable for the government to do things that would not be acceptable at times of peace. Americans don't always have this experience. Our greatest blessing is our greatest curse. America is detached geographically from Europe and Asia. Whenever America gets into a war, it's not in the past 150 years been here on the territory of the United States, it's been somewhere else. So Americans haven't had to live under martial law being inflicted on their own land. In the case of the Russian patriarch's priests in Ukraine, that's exactly what's happened. Now, it is Eastern Orthodox theology who say that all Eastern Orthodox are to be like-minded, theologically speaking. They don't have a pope like the Roman Catholic Church does. But Russian Orthodoxy aside, your typical American Orthodox and Romanian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox and Ethiopian Orthodox, they recognize each other as one and the same church. So if you do hold to Eastern Orthodox beliefs, if you are Eastern Orthodox, you still have the Ukrainian Orthodox Church where you can practice your religion, which I happen to believe is a false one, but it is not Eastern Orthodoxy that's under attack. It's only this particular branch that is a propaganda arm. There's a weird overlap going on right now with Eastern Orthodoxy and Islam. Eastern Orthodoxy and atheism has always been a thing, right, during the Soviet Union. But in Putin's State of the Union address not too long ago, a couple months ago, he was speaking of the Holy Book as being one library with oh, who was it? We had an imam, and I think it was Cyril, sitting next to each other in the audience and everything, trying to recognize a unity between Orthodoxy and Russian Orthodoxy and Islam. So Russia is framing this as a holy war using Islamic terminology. They're sending Muslims to die alongside Russian Orthodox. The Russian Orthodox Church is saying you can die for your own sins, thereby saying that if you're a Muslim who dies in the war against the West, then you are paying for your own eternal life and all this and all that.
I already mentioned a couple of things, but the major thing that this Fox News anchor was wrong about, he misunderstood completely the situation with religion in Ukraine. You know, we have, before the unification of all Orthodox churches in Ukraine, we had around 4 or 5, if I'm not mistaken, Orthodox churches. Among this Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy was one of the largest, if not the largest, but when we received Ukrainian Orthodox Church, if I'm not mistaken, in 2018 received Thomas. This is actually a piece of paper that pronounces autocephaly of Ukrainian Church as autonomous church among all Orthodox churches, and that's when this issue was rising with Moscow Patriarchy. They didn't want Ukrainian church to be to function autonomously from Moscow Patriarchy, and so this anchor didn't know the fact that right now the situation is that 80 or 90, even 90% of all Orthodox churches and all Orthodox believers affiliate themselves with autonomous Ukrainian church. You know, that the one that received Thomas, or the paper that grants autonomy, national autonomy from Constantinople Patriarchy. You know, Constantinople Patriarchy is one of the main, the main one, and now, like as I said, the majority of Orthodox population in Ukraine doesn't belong to Moscow, but to Ukrainian Church of Moscow Patriarchy. That's one fact. Another one is that the one I mentioned, and they were spreading horrible things about Ukraine and Ukrainians and Ukrainian culture and language, which is definitely not acceptable during the war, as you mentioned. This is times of war or extraordinary situation need extraordinary measures. In this case, banning communistic party, banning pro-Russian parties, and anyone reminiscing about how good Soviet Union was, because this is all part of Russian propaganda and brainwashing people, feeding them lies, basically false stories.
I don't really think it's the idea of Zelensky to start it all. As far as I saw it on the news and among the people I know in Ukraine, among my own friends and acquaintances, people actually started it themselves. Like SBU, I'm not sure how to say it in English. Maybe you can help me.
SBU.
Yeah, SBU, and the office, the president's office, only led to the official and legitimate checkings of the all these popes and their bank accounts and what they have in their lavra, etc., etc. So it was actually quite a legitimate checkings, in my opinion. And in the end, we see that a lot of things which are supporting Russian regime were found. I don't see how it can be bad, because, well, let's also say like that. Everything which we tolerated much before 2022, I mean, before full-scale war, just simply cannot be tolerated at the moment, because Russian people and Russian church are killing Ukraine. And that's very important. And Russian church is supporting it. Their patriarch is supporting it openly, saying it absolutely openly. So this is one of the Russian source of killing Ukrainian people. So why would we tolerate Moscow Patriarchate in the middle of Ukraine?
So you don't think he's attacking Christianity?
No, because he is not attacking Christianity. We can phrase it, although I don't really see it like that. We can say he's attacking Moscow Patriarchate, like Ukrainian church under Moscow Patriarchate. But why it even should exist in Ukraine, I also don't really understand. We do have our own patriarchate. Why not?
I go to a Reformed, I visit, and I'm a member of a Reformed church. My church has been helping Ukrainian military since the war started in 2014. People were sending food to these people. They were making special nets that help to hide vehicles and everything else. They were help to buy things for the army, and it's a fact that without such help of volunteers, we would be in a much worse situation. Right next to our church, there is an Orthodox church that was not only not helping, but they were not ever saying a word about the war. And I was checking the page of the priest and his wife in the beginning of the full invasion, and they never said anything. They were saying we want peace or we have to pray for Ukraine, but they never said that Russia started the war or that we need to support the Ukrainian military, not Russian military, or something like that. So if you are a president, and of course, people who are not saying anything, that's also a choice that every civilian does. You either say something or you don't say something. And when you don't say something, it turns out that you're supporting Russia. You're supporting Russia because that's actually what the Russians do. They don't talk about things instead of doing something about it. So if you are a president and you see that there is a church that is supporting Russia, and by the way, this church is not just being silent about something, they are talking about Moscow and that they are doing the right things. I think there is video evidence in internet. It's not hard to find Orthodox priests talking about Putin. So you need to kick out this propagandists out of Ukraine if you don't want the revolution to be started. If you don't want Ukrainians to support Russia, there are many Ukrainians that support Russia because they are fooled by that propaganda, and there are many militaries in Ukraine that were killed because pro-Russian Ukrainians chatted Russians and told where those militaries were, and they hit this place with a racket. So yeah.
Also, important thing which we need to notice that this organization, Moscow Patriarchy, even though of course there are people who believe in God, but generally speaking, this organization largely pro-Russian, and in pro-Russian I mean not just that they like Russia, but they are connected with the Russian special forces, they're priests and serve it. And we have some criminal cases and investigations which are going on, and I think it's a good thing, and we should do it. And there are a lot of things we should say about the narratives which they are given, and some of this stuff is probably unacceptable during the war, and it could be treated as the how you call it, exactly the separatism, like call to separation to against the sovereignty of our nation. And there are many other horrible things about them, the level of corruption, pedophilia, and all this stuff. It's just fruitful and multiply in their circle. And it's also interesting concerning the narrative of conservatives who's supposed to be against all these things, and they named this organization that is like church, almost the main church in Ukraine, and they are persecuted. And basically there is no anything about regular believers. The criminal cases is for the priests who are connected with the Russian special forces and who serve by different means with Russia, and it's not a secret for everybody. And you could see how they become, what cars do they have, like who are these people, that it's not just the regular Christian ministers. And also the thing is that they were given by government because government were pro-Russian. They gave them some historical places, for example in Kiev, Lavra. They were given it for them for rent by like conditions which are not beneficial for our country. And that's why they need to review these contracts and make it somehow fair, because it's impossible that you would just come, for example, and say, I'm a pastor of this Reformed church, please give me, I don't know, what would you like city hall, give me the city hall and we would meet there, or stuff like this. And it's completely impossible. So there was also corruption in the government, which allowed them to have these contracts.
For me, it's not a news that they are collaborating because they have this ideology or even a theology of like a big Russia and blah, 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 and that Ukraine is a part of it. And so this is not a news. They have always been collaborated. They have always been pro-Russian. They have been calling Russians to come Russian Patriarchy is blessing weapons and telling people to go die in the war, and they will go immediately to heaven if they die in this war. My problem is that because this was known, and Russian Orthodox Church was a big player in getting Yanukovych elected, first time when he was elected and the second time when he was actually elected. So my question is, especially as a lawyer, why this never happened before? I'm sure SBU knew about their collaboration, and that they were, they were in Donbass. They were sheltering the terrorists, the pro-Russian terrorists back then. So this is my only question. But you need to understand that in Ukraine, for American Christians that don't know, in Ukraine we have now 2, but we used to have 3 different Orthodox churches. Now we have the legit Ukrainian Orthodox Church, done in the Orthodox legal way. I don't know much about canonical law, but done in the correct legal way. Russian Church had to either, but because Ukraine has a freedom of religion, the Russian Church stayed here, and that's why the Presbyterians and Baptists and Methodists and everybody has the freedom to do whatever they want to do, roughly speaking. So it's not, so none of us is being persecuted. He's not persecuting Christians per se. It's just the people that are, regardless of their profession, let's say, people that are committing treason and committing crimes are being persecuted. The fact that it's coinciding with the fact that they work in the church or are part of the church, has nothing to do with the fact that, with the idea that he's persecuting Christians. That's my point. I'm not persecuted, and I haven't been persecuted.
Well, they closed a lot of Protestant churches on occupied territories in Ukraine. So those territories that they captured by force, and a lot of Protestant pastors were tortured and killed for helping our army, for being volunteers. A lot of our church buildings, Protestant church buildings, were utterly destroyed. For example, I visited Kherson, that is still like a border city right now, on frontline city, and I visited Tavrisky Christian Institute, where my dear wife studied for a long time. Now this campus is completely destroyed. Recently, I had conversation with my dear fellow pastor Michael, who were able to flee from that occupied territory with his family, and he told me that Russian soldiers, they captured their church building, they use it for their own purposes, and they stole everything, even church pulpit. Carl, what's going on? But they just stole church pulpit. They stole some items on children's playground near church. So these are just several examples of this kind of attitude. But you're completely right. If you are in Russian Federation, and if you'd like to express your opinion about what's going on, and you are Protestant, you'll be considered as an enemy of the state, sure. And a lot of people who call themselves Orthodox people, they will just call to KGB and say, listen, here is this guy. So that's why a lot of my friends, they just fled Russian Federation, and I cannot tell their names and surnames, of course.
Yeah.
So I think so. There is no understanding of Russian Orthodox Church in the West, because this Russian Orthodox Church was created by Stalin in 1943, and those who were willing to serve, they were in concentration camps, in Soviet concentration camps, and then he pulled them out of there, and they agreed to work simultaneously for the government and for the church. So since that time, the Moscow Patriarchy, Russian Orthodox Church, completely controlled by the KGB. No one bishop were appointed without consent of the KGB. No one. So I think still the church is working for the government. It's ideological assets. It's not a Christian denomination, Christian church.
The Russian Orthodox Church was a servant of KGB service in the former Soviet Union. That's why it was normal to put the agents of KGB disguised as popes into the churches. And I think what Zelensky did is he found this. He got rid of maybe possible or real agents of Russia who were simple monks in Russian Orthodox Church situated in Ukraine. It was not his attack against Christianity at all. It's only because of the special role of Russian Orthodox Church in the former Soviet Union and in Russia and in Ukraine. Because in Russia, if you have heard about it, this Russian Patriarch Kirill, he prayed for Russian soldiers who went to Ukraine. So they use the same method as German Nazis. They just say, okay, we have a special mission. We have to fight against our enemies and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of people in Russia, they're mostly Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. They believe that they go to the holy war against Nazis in Ukraine. That's why it is a great need to send people to the army in order to protect Russia. But it's only the narrative for Russian population. It's also a brainwash.
First of all, Ukraine always. So I'm a Christian already 14 years, almost 15. And even it's a short period of time. A lot of my friends, much longer, who is living in Ukraine. Ukraine always was well known, even with the pro-Russian government, as one of the country with the most like spiritual openness in the former Soviet countries. And we send many missionaries to Russia, Belarus, like Kazakhstan and other countries around us, especially where it's easier to use language. And the freedom was, at least if to compare Ukraine with other countries, overall freedom, I would say one of the word that describe Ukraine, desire to live in freedom, I would say, and the spiritual freedom was one of the part of our country. We always had a lot of sects and good churches, which I think this is how freedom looks, not like in Russia where they close everybody, all churches. So again, here I can answer. Now I have this way of answering, a short way. Like, okay, let's say he's true. Zelensky closed or want to close one church. Putin closed ton of churches. Zelensky is a beginner. He's in the first class of closing churches. Putin already, and during the last 10 years, closed so many churches. And Tucker probably not the Orthodox. He's probably, if he's a Christian, he's probably closer to Protestantism. And Putin is fighting with Protestantism because this is the religion that proclaim truth much more than Orthodox religion.
Ukrainian is the most free country for religion in all post-Soviet countries. So we have a lot of different denominations, churches, religions, and so on. But the main case with this Russian Orthodox Church is that that many of priests support Russian propaganda and Russian narratives. And unfortunately, they provide this propaganda for their churches and for their for visitors and so on. So Zelensky is trying to make church independent from Russian roots and so on. So, and the main case right now is Kievo-Pecherska Lavra, who is national monastery, or how to say, and a Russian church ran this place and live like monks on this monastery. But right now, Zelensky just stopped the contract for Russian church to stay in this Kievo-Pecherska Lavra. So yeah, for many churches right now, maybe it's a ring, yeah, or how to say, it's just a red light. So maybe just many churches not sure, will it go, would it be some troubles with other churches? But I'm sure that I hope so, that all this stuff will stop with Russian Orthodox Church and Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchy and with this Kievo-Pecherska Lavra situation and so on. So we as a Christian feel freedom and feel free to gather together, to have worship in. So I'm not agree with this point of view.
I think since the time of the Soviet Union, a Russian Orthodox Church has compromised itself and was acting as one of the government's departments. So like a Department of Transportation or a Ministry of Transportation, that would be a Ministry of Religion. And it seemed that was the function of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia. As a department, it was a ministry which is subject to the government and FSB, or ex-KGB service. Particularly Gundyaev, the present leader of Russian Orthodox Church, he's a former KGB agent. It's an open fact. It's a known fact. So from open sources, you don't even have to dig deep. That is the guy who runs the church, and Orthodox Church in Ukraine, the Russian Orthodox Church, they've compromised themselves by not staying out of politics, but they, at least some of them, would take active role in advancing pro-Russian views. So they became secret agents or pro-Russian politicians here in Ukraine, advancing political and geopolitical agenda of Russia, not the kingdom agenda, God's kingdom agenda.
This is a very sensitive topic because, it truly is not an independent church. It's a department of Russian government in very many aspects. Of course, there are some true disciples there, some true bishops, some true monks, and I think that our government should be very careful and not to persuade the people who have no crime. And I hope they will do the best job of it. Because I think it doesn't make any difference whether you are a bishop or a regular civilian. If you are committing crimes against Ukraine, if you are supporting Russians, if you provide them with information, if you're doing propaganda in your church instead of messa, how do you call it? It's mess. Instead of instructing people in the ways of God, you're doing the propaganda in favor of Russians. I think that regardless of who are these people, they broken the law, and they should be persuaded according to the law. And I hope that our government does the best. And because there are people there who follow their heart and Jesus, and I hope they stay in the hunt. What I can say from living in Ukraine for all my life, it's a very tolerant society, and people don't tend to persuade someone else just for thinking differently or going to some church. I've never seen anything like that. So I hope it remains the same. But it's a very sensitive topic, and I hope very much that our government shows some really good example of how should this be handled.
Honestly, I don't dislike Tucker Carlson. I always thought he was pretty on target with just.
I always loved him, but when it comes to Ukraine, I'm like, are you smoking or what?
Exactly. I don't know what happened to him, and I thought maybe he's just misunderstanding the situation. Maybe he's just reacting to Biden or something. But then he started talking about this patriarchy thing and persecuting Christians, and I was like, okay, he's gone too far. He knows the truth of this. He's got to know the truth of this, because the Russian Orthodox Church is nothing but they're just informants. They are raising up people within Ukraine who are actively against Ukraine. If you're the leader of a nation and you've got a very clear group of people who are fighting against you within your borders, you get rid of them. It didn't matter if they were Christians or not Christians. I personally, from their fruit, don't believe they're even believers. But the Russian patriarchy. You look at the symbol of Russia. Sometimes you see a two-headed eagle. That's the government, and that's the Russian Orthodox Church, the Pravoslavny Cerkov. And they are absolutely in lockstep with each other, and they are helping each other out, and they are a threat to the nation. He's not persecuting Christians. He's driving out a threat during war. If they were only, helping people and they were sharing the gospel, he never would have touched them. He never would have gone anywhere near them. He doesn't care if they're doing that. He doesn't care if other people do it. What he cares about is, people who are a threat to the nation in a time of war. So that was the only reason that happened, I believe. And I absolutely believe that Tucker Carlson understands that, and I don't know why he's turning a blind eye to it. And my mind goes crazy with that, thinking, is he being paid off? What are the ulterior motives that he has for doing this? Because he seems like a smart guy. He's well read. He understands the way war works and the threats. So I don't understand why he would do that unless there's an ulterior motive.
No, I do not see Zelensky as attacking Christianity in any way. In my mind, in my experience from having been in Ukraine for 26 years, the Russian Orthodox Church, in other words, the Moscow Patriarchy, is a cult, not a true church. And I don't say that lightly. You don't make those kinds of accusations lightly. But as I explained before, that church was infiltrated by the KGB during the Soviet Union. And so the people who are running the church today are not Christians. These are not people who know the gospel, who love God, and who seek to follow Jesus Christ. These are people who are, to a large extent, people who are trained by the KGB. There are people who are hand in glove with the Russian government. They're supporting the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So they are not preaching the gospel and trying to build the Church of Jesus Christ in any way. And so their minions in Ukraine, those in Ukraine who have been loyal to the Moscow Patriarchy, they are working with Russia against the sovereignty of Ukraine. They're working with the invaders. So when you have an organization like that in your country, when you're under attack, you have to limit that organization. I think of World War II, Japanese and German organizations operating in the United States. They were severely limited, or I don't know the exact history of what happened to those organizations, but you can imagine, pro-Japanese and pro-German organizations in World War II in the United States, what was happening with them. This Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine is pro-Moscow. It's pro-Putin. It's following the lead of Kirill, this patriarch in Moscow. So Ukraine has to do something. And I will add to that our church here in Lviv and in Ukraine, our Presbyterian church, our Protestant church, we have gotten more and more freedom. The farther we move from the Soviet Union, time-wise, the farther we get from Russia, the more freedom we have. The Protestant movement in Ukraine has become a lot more accepted. It's becoming more mainstream in a very good way. It's the Russian Orthodox Church that would call us a sect and a cult. The Ukrainian church doesn't do that. The Greek Catholic Church here in Lviv does not do that. And so we love what we see happening in Ukraine. Ukraine is a country with religious freedom, but it's stopping those who are working with Russia to cause the demise of this country.
Ми з вами бачились в Херсоні, і там реально дуже небезпечно. Ви тоді поїхали, ми одразу перемістилися до Антоновського мосту, і рівно через 2 години після вашого від'їзду ми попали під обстріл. Обстріл і танковий обстріл. Не стойте возле окна. На ту сторону, давайте дойдем, обстрел идет. Пробегай, пробегай!
Украина – это наша страна.
Денис, быстрей! Потім прилетіла в ту саму ОДА.
Там, де ми були, так.
Так, і це будь-якої миті могло статися.
Дуже важливо бути там, бути де наші військові, бути там, де люди втрачають своє життя. Я абсолютно з великою повагою відношусь не тільки до військових, я до всіх скажу, хто віддав своє життя. І там були і журналісти, і електрики, ти це прекрасно знаєш, ДСНСники, прикордонники. Вони не хотіли віддавати своє життя. Ні у кого немає впевнений. Просто хочу віддати життя. Таких людей не існує. Але ризикуючи своїм життям захищати інших, це велика повага до таких людей. І президент повинен своїм прикладом показувати. Навіть якщо ти боїшся, ти повинен показувати цю відвагу.
Ми сьогодні говоримо про рік повномасштабної війни. Що ви усвідомили за цей рік?
Пріоритети змінились дуже сильно. Я, напевно, не думаю про деякі речі, про які колись там мріяв, або обожнював, або працював щоденно, місяцями, роками, щоб щось там заробити, гроші і щось там, знаєш, ти прекрасно це розумієш.
Розумію, да.
А зараз розумієш, що все це вторинно, точно.
Мені здається, що одна справа – бути президентом, а інша справа, зовсім інша – це президентом воюючої країни.
Я вважаю, в принципі, що коли ти президент воюючої країни, ти тільки в цей момент усвідомлюєш, що ти президент, і що таке президент, і яка це реальна відповідальність. Саме в такі складні, шокові моменти, саме це я усвідомив, але не в перший день. В перший день я нічого не усвідомлював, я адекватно діяв швидко, просто в мене не було часу на діалоги або там якось вагатись. Не можна вагатись щоденно і змінювати план. Давай ми оберемо як. Ми залишаємось точно, ми захищаємо, так, ми до останнього, де? Я буду на Банковій. Це ж мій офіс, я буду тут, окей. І ось так ми домовились. А тепер як нам не віддати Київ? Дивись, ось переходи мостові, а ось мости, а ось ще щось. І тому, якщо вони будуть підступати, що будемо робити? Будемо робити 1, 2, 3, 4 і все. Було багато різних думок, куди мені їхати, йти, бігти, ховатись, тощо. Всередині держави таких думок було не менше, ніж у західних партнерів.
Якщо уявляти, що ви погодились, наприклад, не на Сполучені Штати, а, наприклад, трошки більш безпечну зону, там, умовно, Хмельницький, Львів.
Я думаю, що якщо б я поїхав, більше був би ризик того, що столиця могла б бути захопленою. Мені всередині держави також говорили, головне зберегти президента. І навіть якщо у нас залишиться тільки Західна Україна, були такі меседжі мені. Західна Україна, ти там повинен бути президентом. Потім почнемо щось відбудовувати і відновлювати, деокуповувати територію. Я не погодився, тому що я знаю, що таке Київ. Я багато всього читав. І я пам'ятаю книжки про Другу світову війну і про окупацію Києва. То, що я знаю, що таке столиця будь-якої держави. Якщо пала столиця і побіг лідер, держави немає.
А ви обговорювали це рішення з дружиною, з батьками?
Моя сім'я, слава Богу, вони мене знають. Такий діалог, він би мене послабив.
На Печерську затримували ДРГ російські.
Так було.
Коли вам про це доповідали, ви ж розуміли, що вони вже біля вашого офісу. Як ви прогнозували свої дії? Яким ви
Я
собі
думаю, що
уявляли?
нас би не було, якщо б вони зайшли в адміністрацію всередину. І якщо ти не пускаєш когось до себе, що відбувається?
Полон чи смерть?
Я думаю, що нікого в полон би не взяли, тому що у нас була дуже серйозно підготовлена оборона банків. Дуже серйозно. Ми б до останнього там були. У нас були ящики зі зброєю, з патронами, в різних точках банкових.
Я десь чув, що у вас теж був пістолет.
Та у мене є. Да.
Ви тренуєтесь? Вмієте?
Так, я вмію. Усвідомлюєш собі, президент України в полоні у росіян. Це ганьба.
Важко.
Просто я вважаю, що це ганьба.
Це для того пістолет?
Ні, ти що, ми самі себе не відстрілювались, да.
Ви усвідомили, що ви не просто президент воюючої країни, ви ціль номер 1 Росії. І зараз цей потяг теж ціль, тому все так таємно.
Не можна думати про це постійно. Треба, напевно, це усвідомлювати, щоб все ж таки бути адекватною людиною і розуміти, що є безпекові якісь моменти, і треба на них звертати увагу. Але, тим не менш, постійно про це думати просто неможливо.